You just check my screen that I'm visible.
And you are live.
Hello and welcome to part 3 in our series. I have another interactive session planned for you today. So if you feel like joining me with your special cello chair, your bow, cello, and black practice mute, this one, close by, do take a few moments to organize this. One moment, William, just hold that one for me. Let's just spend a few moments before starting with this simple movement. Hands under the arms, thumbs up, fingers to the back. Shoulders resting on the hands. It's just a chance to get to sense your breath and your back. Last week's theme was the principle of opposition, power and balance, leading into today's theme, the power of the back and spine, and light or empty arms. I'd like to begin with these two sayings from Lao Tzu, the Chinese monist philosopher. Power and emptiness. The paradox, two opposites reconciled as one. How do we reconcile these opposites? Or better question, how are they reconciled in us? Through letting go of trying to do. The reconciliation takes place when one does not interfere. The path of the Alexander technique is discovering how and where and when we get in our own way. So let's take a look at the back first. What is the back? The back is a complex system of musculature and nerves. And from the vantage point of the Alexander technique, there are two sets of playing muscles in the back to know about as cellists. They're called the erector spinae, muscles of the back. And they are the muscles that support your back and that run longitudinally alongside the spine. Sometimes they're referred to as the paraspinals. There are three sets of muscles that form the group called the erector spinae. The iliocostalis, the longissimus, and the spinalis. They span from the base of the skull to the pelvis, and the primary function of these muscles is to hold us upright or erect, as the name suggests. Much of the time, these muscles are either too tight or in a state of collapse, both of which cause back pain and various other problems for cellists. Allowing for lengthening up along the spinal column requires the right kind of engagement of these long muscles, as they are key to the primary control of our use. And I have another view of these, a slightly larger picture of them. Not yet, just one moment. Thank you. I just wanted to point out how deeply they go into the whole of the back. And so if you're sensing your pelvis behind you and your back behind you and your neck behind you, you can think of them running up from the base of the spine to the top of the spine. Thank you, William. Now these are real cello playing muscles. They're called the lifter muscles in Alexander's term, or the anti-gravity muscles. The proper name for them is Latissimus dorsi, and if you go to the gym, they're called the lats for short. They are the largest set of muscles in the upper body, and they are our powerhouse. Latissimus in Latin means broad, and broad they sure are. They supply the energy to our limbs, and we need to know how to plug into them properly and to use them well. The attachment of the latissimus is to the spine from the 7th thoracic vertebrae to the 5th lumbar vertebrae, and the iliac crest of the sacrum. So you can see those two bumps at the bottom there, the top of the pelvis. In there, it really goes into that spine from the 7th. And at the upper end, into the humerus, or the arm bone. If you want a little anatomy here, all the muscle fibers together attach to the floor of the intertubercular sulcus of the arm bone, and between the pectoralis major and the teres major. There's a nice little mnemonic to remember. The lady, latissimus, between two majors, the pectoralis and the teres major. So simply think of the latissimus muscle as the driver and the powerhouse for your arms. The power to play primarily originates in the latissimus, not much in the smaller muscles of the arm, which are required for specific tasks like repeated bow strokes, string changes, quick shifts. Yes, we need those arm muscles, but not to the degree that we need our back. Most cellists, in my experience, overuse the arms and underuse the back. You may remember the quote from F.M. Alexander in my first cello chat. I'll read it again because it's a wonderful quote. The stiffened necks and arms of people of today are outward signs of the imperfect development and lack of coordination of the muscular system of the back and spine. The principle of mechanical advantage permits the application of force through leverage rather than strain and overexertion. Alexander speaks here of leverage. The arm is a system of levers raised by the power provided by the back. I often give my students a simple example of a paint tin and a screwdriver. You can try to open the tin with your fingernails, but it's not easy. Much quicker way is to take a long screwdriver and to put the end of the screwdriver under the lid. That becomes a fulcrum. It's a point through which force can be transferred. So the screwdriver becomes the lever. The fulcrum is at the point of the tin lid. And the force that you apply to that screwdriver enables the lid to flip. So the lever is a transmitter of force. It is not a generator. So that's a very simple analogy. Using the arm is a little bit more complex, of course, but nevertheless, we want to be careful that the arm does not usurp the back. So, what does it mean to work from the back? As Alexander discovered, when the primary control is functioning well, that's the head-neck-back relationship, the back can lengthen and widen, and in so doing, energizes the limbs. This is something that I can best demonstrate in person, unfortunately not on a screen. And it is striking to experience. The energy of the back and spine goes deep into the center of us, from the top of the spine to the very base of the spine, and wide to the very edges of us. A balanced arm which is light and seems empty is the result of the back working efficiently. One of the famous teachers in the Alexander technique used to say, "Let all the good work go on in the back." What she meant was not to interfere by tightening the smaller and less important muscles, like those of the neck, shoulders, arms, and legs. When the back is left to function freely, it will deliver all the power we need to play. So now I have two clips for you here. One in the animal kingdom and one in the human being department. The first I've called Moving Tiger, No Dragon. It's just a film in which you can see, you can witness the power of the back driving the limbs of the animal. Watch how the back expands. You can see it go up and you can see it go out as the animal propels the limbs forward. You can also see that little forward extension of the head, of course, which is leading the way. The head leads and the body follows. Thank you. Just one moment before you move to number 8. I want to mention that you can see the focus in the animal's face, but not strain. I find that very remarkable to watch when animals are moving, the intense focus, but not strain. So the whole of the body is moving, being led by the head and the eyes. There's no strain. Number 8. Now we're moving to everybody's favorite tennis player. Here, this is a great shot of Roger Federer moving all the time from his back and letting the arms move away from the back. So the back is controlling and delivering power. And if you focus on the head and the relationship of the head to the back, you see that there's never a contraction. He's not shortening the relationship between the head and the body. In fact, he's doing the opposite. It's lengthening as he moves. And as his arm is going forward, his back goes back in space. So he's always connected to that power source. He's so free in his legs. That's another wonderful thing to watch. Thank you, William. I'm not quite yet on that one. The sound at the cello that emanates from being connected well and deeply with the back, as in fact Roger Federer is, can be extraordinary if you think of Casals, Fournier, Rostropovich, and a host of others. For me, that defines the word presence. Ancient cultures, India, China, Egypt, speak about the energies of the back. In hexagram 52 of the I Ching are the words, stilling your back, not grasping yourself. My Alexander teacher calls it harmonizing the mind with the back. Alexander rediscovered this ancient wisdom for the Western world in his concept of the primary control, an organizing principle which can unify within us the power of thought, our physical resources, and our emotions. I'd like to speak a little bit about the theory of the heavy arm. Lifting the arm is a whole body activity, but as we've spoken about, the power comes primarily from the back. When I was learning to play the cello, my teachers taught me to make my arm heavy and let the weight drop into the string. After years of study in the Alexander technique, I have revised my understanding to use the term a supported arm. Trying to make the arm heavy and trying to feel its weight seems unnecessary and in some ways counterproductive. With the directions for the primary control, head forward and up, back, back and up, hips back, knees away, heels well down. The arm seems to float up as if with power steering. There is almost no effort required and it feels so light. Interesting that I once read Yo-Yo Ma in an interview saying, and I paraphrase here a slight bit, "When I play my best, my arms feel empty." I developed the following exercises that I'm going to demonstrate as the use of my back began to improve through study of this work. And I wanted a way to bring in what I was learning from the Alexander technique into my cello playing. Now, the exercises themselves are not the object. I primarily practice with my mind quiet as I go through these exercises. the object is not to do them correctly, but to put my thinking and the quietness at the center of the activity, maintaining an open, easy attention and making sure that I don't interfere with the primary control as I move. So I'm going to just demonstrate a few of them. Bearing in mind that before this, I spent quite a long time learning to put my hand on a bow and not stiffen my neck, because that was such a powerful stimulus, just to take hold of the bow. And that took me quite a long time to come back into a really quiet place where I could touch the bow and not have the old habitual response, and then learning to lift it. That was another challenge. But once I got through that, then I thought, well, how am I going to bring it into playing, actually? So if you have your black mute, you can apply it now. And I start with a very simple exercise. It's called the empty arm exercise. And if you saw my part 2 last week, you'll know that I introduced this position of 2 in front and 2 behind. Because when you place the bow on the string, then you can take your thumb off. So you have your opposition between your front 2 fingers towards you and your back 2 fingers away. And then you can either rest the thumb on top of the bow, or you can let it float away from the stick. And all you're doing is learning to rest the bow on the string, so the string is supporting you. You're giving the bow to the string. And the other place that you're being supported is from the black mute. So it creates like the edge of a box, and you're right there in the corner. So you're not afraid of dropping the bow, and the string is supporting it as well. And then you can take the thumb off, and you can move to different strings. Now the idea here is to come up against that habit of squeezing and tightening in the arm. So the arm should remain quiet. You're not playing, and it's amazing how many people still tighten the arm even when they're not playing. Now you can explore that pivoting movement with the thumb either dangling or resting on top. So you're exploring different heights, but the pivot does not require that you stiffen the arm to move. And you're moving right from here where the shoulder joint is. It's not up in here with the cut of your sleeve, but it's here. And then you can pivot in and out, and you can also move horizontally. So you can move back and forth, and just experiencing that resting state of the arm. That's the important thing, that the arm is resting. It's not busy. You can explore your strings as double stops or as single notes. I like to start with double stops because they give you a bit more support. And the idea is that you are, for the moment, putting the sound aside and just being able to be still with that contact with the instrument. That's very important. The stronger your habits are, the more stillness and more time being still is required. Now, a couple other things away from the cello. If you put your bow down and hold your thumb with your left hand, and you can just drop the hand away from that hold. So you're resting your thumb and the rest of the hand is dropping. And you can do that down here. And as you get quieter, you can begin to bring it up to waist level. Then taking the screw of the bow onto the knee, you're working with a quiet connection of each finger to your back. So you still have that support of the knee, and you can let the bow drop into the hand or the knee, whichever, and then removing your fingers and then connecting again. So this is all work in quiet, and it's fundamental to changing habits. That's it. And eventually, you move, when your back is stronger, you move out your support and let it shift into the back. So now it's really all the back that's doing the work. Now I have something called the 3 Ps. So when you're drawing the sound, you're either pulling it or pushing it, but never pressing it. The pressing is the downward force, which is counterproductive to vibration. But if you think about pulling, you're working in this plane and in that plane with the resistance of the string. So you don't really need to press downwards. And this pulling and pushing motion is very much helped by the back. In fact, it's the correct movement. When the back is generating force, you're either pulling or pushing. And when your neck is tightening, you're pressing. So if you have a problem with pressing, think about that area of the neck and the shoulders, all of those muscles that, as Alexander said, instead of providing coordinated support, are interfering with your support. So now with the left arm, I have an exercise that it actually involves both arms. Move this out of the way. But it's very simple, and if you can leave your arm empty, you can sense the power of the back bringing the arm to the string. It's just that. There's no tightening in this large muscle here, and there's no gripping in the forearm. Just coming and falling. And from the sound that you get when it's falling and this is empty, there's a connection immediately with the fingers. Now in Alexander work, we are trained to direct our arms, primarily when we're working on other people, but of course the direction is going on all the time in our lives. And we have specific directions that we give our arms. And that is, we think about the shoulder moving away from the back in that direction, and the elbow away from the shoulder, the hand this way, away from the elbow, and the fingers away from the hand. So the whole arm is lengthening out along a curve that way, instead of contracting and pulling in towards the center. That's, if I see that, I know that the flexor system is overworking and we need to restore the balance between the extensors and the flexors. So the lengthening out of the arm is important. And we work with that when we teach, when we're in the training course and we're working on others. but I spent many years working on that at the instrument. And it's very, very useful because it sensitizes your fingers and connects them with your power source, which is your back. So now if you want to just let your fingers rest on the string and drop your thumb away, so the thumb isn't involved. And it's an exercise really so that you can experience the whole length of your thumb, which is there. That's the bottom of the thumb, and that's the tip. So it's that length. And when you drop it and bring it up and down, you can experience where it pivots from. It pivots from there. And since it's usually the thumb in the left hand that causes a lot of trouble in the lower positions because it's squeezing too hard, this is a really lovely, simple thing that you can do in different places just to experience that freedom and range of the thumb. The fingers are doing absolutely nothing. They're just resting on the string. Now when you do introduce the movement of the fingers, I like to use my fingers in pairs, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 3 and 4, just for the purposes of the Alexander work that I do. So to bring the string to the fingerboard, I never think of that downward direction. I think of a direction where I'm moving into my back. So I'm moving along a curve that way to the space behind me. So the application of force is not into this hard thing, which is a fingerboard. It's hard, and our joints don't like moving along a hard surface, but the string itself is bouncy. So the bounce of the string picks up the bounce of the joints all the way through the body, all the way in, even into the spine. The spinal joints are bouncy. So when you're taking advantage of that moving towards your back, you're bouncing slightly off the string. You do make connection with the fingerboard, but that's an indirect result. The main thing is that you are learning to cling to that string and connect to your back. There's a lovely video of Leonard Rose on the bow, in which he talks about the joints of the arm as a series of springs. He's relating it to the right arm, of course, because it's about the bow, but it's absolutely true for both arms, and I really recommend that you watch that. I think it's called A Cello Lesson with Leonard Rose. It's a long explanation of the arm being a set of springs. Starker talks about the first joint being the point of transmission of the vibrato. So you can have free joints until that first joint, and if that's blocked, the rest of the joints will eventually block up too. So keeping those joints open and springy is really important. So the real work is to free up and improve the use of the back. And that starts away from the cello in your Alexander technique lessons. And with patient and consistent work over the years, the gift that gives is a real back, and along with it, presence of mind. So to wrap up, one of the great teachers of the Alexander technique said it this way. And now, could we have that lovely slide, William? Let the spine light up the fingertips. That was Patrick MacDonald, one of Alexander's pupils. From the age of 10, he took lessons. And he was quite an extraordinary teacher. Thank you. I think we can take some questions if there are any. We have the first one. Why is it that musicians either love or hate the Alexander technique? Well, I would say it depends on your experience. It's like the first time you go to a restaurant and have a dish, if it's badly made, you're going to think, oh, I'll never order that again. So it's very important that the experience you have is a true one and not a sloppy one or a poor one, because the principles themselves are sound, but they are expressed through each person who teaches. Could I clarify the feelings of arms being empty? Well, you know, I can't say what it is, but I can say what it isn't. It isn't tight in the elbow. This isn't raised up. My fingers are not gripping. And my wrists are not stiff. So you notice that I've brought in the major joints, the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and the fingers. And then of course the muscles are slung between them. And you have a sense that the muscles are working, but you don't notice them. So that's probably all I can say is what it's not. So from T.W. Hutchinson, can't read from this far away, I'm going to have to come in. Ultimately, to explore the technique, it requires a musician to stop, to let go, to change, to think. Indeed. Some musicians find this difficult as there is an ever-pushing demand to increase one's skill and enter into a competitive profession. Further, some people do not take to the work quite simply. They don't see, feel, appreciate the benefit. Some few have excellent use and only need a few lessons. Yes, that's well said. I also think it's important to mention that you need to have a few lessons to experience the work with enough power and force to appreciate, to understand something. 1 or 2 lessons will not do it because your sensory awareness is just simply too conditioned, and the work is very sensitive work. So if you had a poor experience, but you still have read some of the books and you feel you would like to go further, don't give up. Don't give up. Let's see. Are there any other questions?
There's one from Suzanne Dicker. If you scroll down on in the chat box.
Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Don't seem to. My screen is frozen, I'm afraid. Let me see. There we go. Can you demonstrate what kind of exercises you do with a pair of fingers you mentioned? Sure. So you take one, let's take 1 and 2. I'm just moving the length of the fingerboard, and I'm focusing on drawing the string back in that direction. Because I want to work with the large movements at the instrument, and that gives me the opportunity to do that, those large movements. Does that answer your question? Do I have any more questions?
Yes, one from let's see.
Here's another one from Will. I liked your mention of habits. Could you elaborate? Well, my presentation next week is going to be all about habits, the challenge of habits and how to change them. I'm praying for help with that every day. That is a huge topic, and how to broach it. But do you have a habit in mind, Will, that you'd like to divulge? Something that you're grappling with? Okay, I'll come back to you, Will, if you've had to think about habits. T.W. Hutchinson says, what would you say are the common pitfalls that beginner cellists repeatedly fall into? Do these vary depending on the age of the student? Well, I would say I would start with feet. For some reason, young cellists like to wrap their feet around chairs or play on their tiptoes or anything, but they don't make use of the ground. So I work a lot with from the beginning with the feet connecting into the ground so that then they can find the connection to the chair that they're sitting in. And then from that connection in the chair, they can find the balance for the rest of themselves. Because the easiest thing for a child is to lose the ground. And I think it's because the instrument is big and they're not accustomed to having something against their body that's so large. And so they make an effort and they push the back forward and the heels come off the ground, and then we're off. Can't do very much after that. And that can be right from the beginning with children. So I have two very heavy weights in my studio. There's like sandbags. And I put them on the children's feet at the beginning of the lesson. And they look at me like, what are you doing? And then after a few minutes, we take it off. And each week, we do that until they have a sense of the ground and the stability that the ground gives them. That's really important. I can't seem to get this chat box to go down. Anything else?
Yes. Will Hayes has a habit of the right shoulder being tense.
Ah, yes, I see. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a big habit. I would say deal with it away from the cello. So if you had lessons, the important thing would be to look at that shoulder in relation to your total pattern of use, your head-neck-back relationship, what's going on with your sitting, what's going on in your pelvic region, and most of all, how are you balancing the weight of your head? And as you begin to understand that the shoulders just rest on the back, they don't need to be raised up like this in order to use the arms. They just rest that way. And as they rest, then they frees the arms to move as they need to move. And then you bring that knowledge into playing and you look at where you go wrong. You're always looking at how you're going wrong when you're working with the technique. Not what the right thing is to do, but how are you interfering? And how are you mostly preparing the wrong way? Because it's in preparation that Alexander found his troubles, his difficulties. Tune in next week and I'll talk a little bit more about habits. Anything else, William?
Yes, there's one asking, could you elaborate on how you could use the primary control to make the arm float up?
To make the arm,
Float up?
oh, float up. Oh, I wish I were with you live because I demonstrate this. It's really difficult to demonstrate on a screen. But basically what it is that when the arm is resting by your side, and if you've done enough Alexander work to understand how to direct, you give your directions for the primary control, which is neck, free head forward and up, back, lengthening and widening. And as you maintain those directions, they are your primary directions. Your secondary directions are to allow the arm to come up. So that's what that secondary direction would be doing. So the arm would come up, but out of the lengthening along the spinal column. So instead of the movement, see if I can demonstrate this maybe a little more clearly. Get this out of the way. So you might be able to see my shoulder now. So as you come up, the movement is not initiated from here or initiated from there. It's initiated through the back. And it's very light. The arm is completely empty. There's no contraction in here, no contraction in here. Just those muscles are doing a minimum amount of work, just what they should be doing, not more. And once you have that, you have what you need to play, because then the back, just like that in that tiger picture, the back can pour the energy into the arms. You want more power, you just pull the string more or push it more, and you open out the back and it delivers the energy into the arms. It's a miracle. I mean, it's extraordinary. Nature has designed us in this way to move effectively and efficiently. But sadly, we don't. We move habitually. And if we were very lucky and had good teachers to instruct us when we were young and we learned these things through the right modeling and instruction, great. But I wasn't so lucky, and I had to relearn just about everything through the prism of this work. Anything else?
There's one from Suzanne.
Yes. Hello, Suzanne.
It's in the chat box, but would you like me to read it to you?
Would you please? Yes, because I don't seem to be able, my screen has frozen in the chat.
She says, I feel that preparing to lift the boat from the knee sitting without the cello was really helpful, and that I could sense my back muscles engaging, even though it was very subtle.
That's good. Well, keep on with that. If you can get the help of an Alexander teacher to work with you whilst you do these simple things like raising the arms, like picking up the bow.
There's another question saying, could you elaborate on the connection of the fingertip to the back and spine?
Oh, is that relative to the last slide?
I think so.
Yep. Well, that is a very high-level comment from a master teacher, a great master teacher, who was able to transmit the energies of the spine into the fingertips. And he could, from all accounts, I never had any lessons with him because he passed away before I came to England, but by all accounts, he was able to pulsate the spine. So with his fingers, he could get the spine, the energies of the spine activated through his fingertips. Sometimes only with one finger, he could activate the entire primary control. But that's such a high level. I do think that a musician like Casals, when I listen to his sound, I hear some kind of energy coming through the back into the fingertip, into the sound of the cello. And he talks about that. I quoted him in my first CelloChat about that organizing factor that comes from the center of the body and goes into the music. And that's what it is. He had it instinctively. But I've spent 25 years now in this work, 26 years, and I'm beginning to sense that kind of energy in the tips of my fingers when I play. Something is coming through the sound, but it's not something I can describe. It's an energy. It's a quality. Again, I can say when I don't hear it, but when I do hear it, it's hard to put into words.
There's another question asking, any tips for teaching left-hand technique to double-jointed children?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Um, well, I can say this, that I had terrible problems with double joints until I strengthened my back. And then I was able to begin to learn to use the joints so that one stacks up against the other. And when I had that connection through my arms, I cured my double joints very quickly. The trouble is that if you're double jointed, very often your back is weak. And so if a student is in a state of collapse, for instance, if they're down here and they put a finger on the string, they are going to collapse the rest of themselves as well, the fingers as the back collapses. So it's important to look at the primary control, strengthen a child's back, and work with, there are various ways to do that. I don't have enough time here to talk about that. And then for the localized things, there are very simple things you can do, which are resistance exercises. So with my children, I do this. So you push on the outside of the finger, and then you pull on the inside. So you're doing that and that. But again, you mustn't over tighten the arms. This and that. And I have various balls. I have various stretch bands and things. I have a whole way of working with double joints. But always look at the total pattern as well as the localized pattern.
There's another question asking, any tips for teaching adults with lumbar pain?
With lumbar pain, teach them lying down if you can figure out a way. Get them to lie down every day. Do the lying down position in Alexander, which is a couple of books under the head, knees up, and just resting the spine for about 15 or 20 minutes twice a day. If you can get them to do that, that's already going to relieve a lot of lumbar pain. And then watch how they sit, because adults tend to sit at the cello the way they sit in life. And if their sitting is distorted without the cello, they're going to bring that distortion to playing the cello. So there's quite a lot to deal with there. But get them lying down first.
I think those are all the questions we have for now.
Lovely.
Thank
Well, thank you for listening. And next week is the talk on the challenge of changing habits. So if you want to bring a habit, I can talk about it with you as much as you want to share in a public forum like this. But I'm happy to do what I can.
Yeah, just a schedule change. Next week we'll have a cello chat with Alban Gerhardt, and then the following week we'll have the fourth part of your cello chat series.
All right, so that's on the 11th, is it?
Let me just double check. Yes, that's correct.
Friday the 11th. Okay, very good.
All right,
All
thank you,
right.
everyone.
Thanks for listening. Farewell.